Hey there guys, welcome back to another video, and today we are going to be completing the 5th Doctor set. My previous video was top 5 best 5th Doctor stories, link up above, but now I'm going to be going through the top 5 worst, and honestly, this video was quite hard to choose picks for. There were a lot of stories in the 5th Doctor era that are kinda just fine, but very few that are bad, really. So options 5, 4, and somewhat 3 are kind of just stories that are not great, although rest assured some of the stories I'm going to mention here are just outright bad. And subsequently, I don't have any honorable mentions for this one. Honestly, I could only really find 5 that I outright disliked. So spoilers for the whole 5th Doctor era, and of course this video is my own opinion. You're fine to disagree with whatever I say here, and if you have a very different opinion to me, let me know down in the comments below. I'm curious to hear what you guys think of the Peter Davison Doctor Who era. And speaking of eras, I swear guys, this is the last time I'm going to do it. Let me know down in the comments below who you want me to do my next classic Doctor Who video on. Do you want me to do it on the 1st Doctor, William Hartnell, or the 3rd, John Pertwee? Guys, I've run through so many Doctors. These are basically the last 2 classic Doctors with a load of stories. And they're also 2 fan favourites, so please let me know which one you want me to make a video on. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and let's get into it. At number 5 we have Terminus, and this is one of the stories that sort of fits into what I was saying before, where this isn't a bad story, it's just exceptionally average, and because of that it's really forgettable. There's very little that this story really has to offer that we haven't seen before or since from Doctor Who, and it's just not that exciting of an episode. A lot of this story kind of just screams mediocre and filler. In particular, I think the direction's just fine. The dialogue is all just fine. What I will say is the plot itself, I think, is really good. I like the idea of an intergalactic plague that, if the ship explodes, will just spread it around the universe. I also really like a lot of the companions bouncing off of each other, in particular Tarlo, who's still working alongside the Black Guardian. I mentioned this when I talked about Mordred Undead, but I really like Turlo and his stuff with the Black Guardian. Less good things can be said for how they deal with Nissa's exit, which, while it's well handled, it's just, you know, symptomatic of the normal Doctor Who companion leaving, although I do appreciate how it's on a more morbid level. But overall, it's just really slow, the story's nothing special, and the production value is quite cheap, which just lessens the effect of anything the story tries to do. Not a bad story, just an aggressively mediocre one. At number 4 we have a guilty pleasure of mine. Look, this story, I'm not gonna lie, is actually pretty fun. Although it's fun in the same way a pantomime is. This story is very run-of-the-mill for Doctor Who, incredibly predictable and sometimes quite childish at points, but it's fun, so honestly, I don't really care half the time. I do really like the medieval setting of this. I think that the production values are really good, and as a general rule, I just like medieval Doctor Who stories. This episode sees the return of Anthony Ainley's master in what might be his worst disguise of them all. And like I said, in the pantomime way, I really enjoyed Anthony Ainley as the master in this story. It has Chameleon in it, who can't operate properly, and to be honest, his inclusion in the story doesn't work to me. And also, I feel like the Doctor acts out of character in a lot of this story. But the dialogue and the direction are both good. It's a fun story. I think its ending sucks quite a bit, but I don't really mind. This story's stupid and I like it, okay? This is a bad story, but it's not too bad. At number 3 we have yet another two-part story, where the first part, which is half of it might I add, is made up 10 minutes of cricket and then 15 minutes of a dinner party. The plot of this is just very reminiscent of the 60s First Doctor stories that are mostly historically based and kind of just a character dramas, but it just doesn't fit the 5th Doctor's era. Randomly going into a pure historical like this, it just doesn't fit with the season, and especially since they didn't choose a particularly interesting era to bring these characters to. And don't get me wrong, I really like the costumes and the set design in this, but in terms of the world and the characters, it's just not very interesting. The pacing sucks, the plot is completely skimmed over at certain points, and this whole story, like I said, just doesn't fit in. I do think that the dialogue is rather good and the direction's good, but so many plot elements kind of just feel like they're there for the sake of it. And the murder mystery element just really didn't grab me. I appreciate the effort from John Nathan Turner, but this one really didn't work in my opinion. At number 2 we have every Doctor Who fan's favourite 5th Doctor story, Time Flight. This story is just too bold, and that's the fact that it was the season finale, which should have been this big climax or this epic story, but you can really tell that the production team spent all their money on Earthshock, because the budget is just so cheap on this one. None of the production design looks very special, the effects look terrible in this story, and yeah, let's talk about the story. There are these big grey cocoon things that the crew of a flight appear in. There are these weird hologram aliens. There's... Okay, I know I said this with the King's Demons, but there's yet another contender for the worst master disguise. Like, literally, it's a bad robber mask. And his disguise is a fairly poorly aged stereotype. And that character itself was just a letdown. The master didn't fit in this story at all, and it's just got such weird storytelling elements that really let this story down. I know it's a minor thing as well, but the story completely skims over Adric's death. The characters are meant to have just come back from that, and they don't really care about Adric being gone. Poor guy. All of the side characters are pretty much the same, minus whatever the hell Anthony Ainley's doing in the story. I do quite like the way that the Doctor, Nyssa, and Tegan interact in this story, although they then write Tegan out, only for her for the next season to get written back in. So the idea of her getting left behind really doesn't matter in the long run, and it doesn't really have much impact given the fact that we immediately see her again. Okay, Big Finish, I hear you. But in all seriousness, this story really just didn't have any impact. It was way too ambitious and didn't have the money nor the talent to really pull it off. This story is very funny in an ironic way, and yeah, it's just aged really poorly. In fact, it probably looked bad at the time, to be honest. Imagine watching Earthshock and then moving on to this. And at number 1, I think we have a story that everyone expected me to talk about here, Warriors of the Deep. And oh god, where to start with this? For starters, it seems like no one was really ready for this story. None of the props looked finished. None of the actors seem to really care about this story, in particular Peter Davison, who kind of just looks bored half the time. None of the characters in this story whatsoever are interesting. Even the Doctor is a boring presence in Warriors of the Deep somehow. And as a whole, this is the kind of story that people bring up when they want to make fun of Doctor Who. This is the kind of conventional schlock that people make classic Doctor Who out to be. Doctor Who is capable of so much more than this. but so many things are wrong with this story. The production value is incredibly cheap. The whole thing is overlit. The sets look very, very plain. And somehow the Silurians and the Sea Devils look worse than they did in the 70s. The plot is just generic Silurian and Sea Devil stuff. There's really nothing new to this story here. But the storytelling is massively what lets it down. The dialogue in particular is hilariously bad. All the character stuff is kind of just non-existent here. The direction is awful in this story. Honestly, there's nothing to like about Warriors of the Deep. It's just bad. For bringing back two iconic Third Doctor villains, it really just drops the ball on them. And above all else, it just becomes a parody of itself. This is one of the few Doctor Who stories that's just painful to watch. And I haven't even mentioned how bad the pacing is. My god, this story is boring. You brought back the fish people and the lizard people, and it still sucks. The ending is just dour, and it begins to take itself seriously towards the end there, which is weird. Yeah, not much really works about this story. It's so poorly made, it's so badly written, no one cared in this story, and subsequently, it massively suffered. This came in the same season as my favourite Fifth Doctor story. I don't know what to say about Warriors of the Deep. I'm just going to forget it exists again. And to be honest, I recommend that the rest of you do too. For failing on this much promise, Warriors of the Deep is my least favourite Fifth Doctor story. And that is it for the Fifth Doctor. Thank you so much for watching this video. Once again, let me know down in the comments what your thoughts on the best and worst Fifth Doctor stories are below. And again, please tell me whether you want me to talk about the First Doctor or the Third Doctor next. And with that all said and done, thank you for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, like and comment. And I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.